Welcome to another video from ExplainingComputers.com. This time we're going to set up a new PC by making any required BIOS changes, installing and activating Windows 11 and installing motherboard and GPU drivers. Throughout, I'm going to focus on obtaining a clean system with minimal bloatware. So let's go and get started. Right, here we have the i3-14100F PC that I built in a recent video. And whilst I showed the system running at the end of the build, I didn't explain the software setup. So I've returned the SSD in the system to factory state, so what we have here again is a new PC with a completely blank SSD. So let's turn it on. There we go. And because we don't have a bootable drive connected, the PC will either display a message that states this, or it will enter its BIOS, which is what I expect will happen here, and which is where we initially want to go. However, if your PC doesn't enter the BIOS as has happened here, you'll need to reboot and press the appropriate key, which is typically delete, F2 or escape, and which will be briefly indicated on the screen during the boot process. Anyway, now that we're here, it's worth noting there's no standard PC BIOS layout, so the one on your system may look different. But the same basic information and options will be presented initially as here in what's usually called easy mode. And here we can see our motherboard model and CPU information, as well as information on our memory, which here comprises two 8GB DDR4 modules. As we can see, these are currently running at 2667 megatransfers per second, or thereabouts, which is the fastest speed that DDR4 usually defaults to on a modern motherboard. However, the RAM fitted in this PC is 3200 megatransfers per second, which is the fastest DDR4 speed that our i3-14100F CPU supports. And to get our RAM to run at its rated speed, as very often on a new system, we need to enable an Extreme Memory Profile, or XMP. We could do this down here in easy mode using this dialog box down there, although I like to work in advanced mode where we get to see a bit more information. So let's click on Advanced Mode, where somewhere we'll find an Extreme Memory Profile option, and here it is in the Tweaker menu. So if we click on this, I can select Profile 1 like that, and there we are, the system has identified we have our DDR4 3200 RAM. So let's save and exit like that, and save and exit setup, and yes, and the system will reboot. And there we are, our RAM is now operating at its full speed. It's worth noting that if your system has got DDR5 RAM, it will typically default to a speed of 4800 unless you enable an XMP. And so if you do have DDR5 RAM rated faster than 4800, you'll need to do what we've just done here on this DDR4 PC to get full memory performance. Finally, it's worth noting that many modern motherboards have a default setting that allows a driver software utility to be automatically downloaded. This will run after a Windows installation and can save time. However, it can also be a security risk and place bloatware on the system. And personally, I'm not a fan of allowing a computer to download software without asking me. And so, on this Gigabyte system, I'm going to go to Settings and I/O ports like that. And I'll go down to Gigabyte Utilities Downloader Configuration, and we're going to set that to Disabled. Note that on MSI motherboards, you'll find a similar setting for what is usually called MSI Driver Utility Installer, and on ASRock motherboards, one for something like ASRock Auto Driver Installer. Of course, you may be happy letting your PC download what it likes from the internet, but it's not a potential security backdoor that I ever risk, and so I always disable this relatively new motherboard feature. And so, with things to my liking, let's again save our changes. Power down by pressing and holding the power button, and go in search of an operating system. Greetings! We're now on another computer where we're going to download a copy of Windows 11. And I'll provide a link to this page and all other pages I show in the video in the video description. Microsoft provides three options on this page. The first is the Windows 11 Installation Assistant, which is for installing Windows 11 on the device we're currently using. We clearly don't want that. And then the second option is to create a Windows 11 installation media on either a USB drive or a DVD. And the third option is to download a Windows 11 ISO file, which we can use with imaging software to create a Windows 11 installation media. And we will take a look at this a bit later in the video. But for now, for most people, I think the most straightforward thing to do is to create a Windows 11 installation media. So we'll download the tool now. There we go, just a small tool, and we'll now run it up. Yes, Windows, we really want to do it. And we have to accept the license agreement. And then check the language and edition, which happen to be the same as we have here on this PC. And then next, we're going to keep the default option of creating a Windows 11 USB drive, which, as we can see, needs to be at least 8 GB in size. And Windows has noticed I haven't plugged a drive in, so I'll do so now. There we go, and I'll refresh my drive list and pick up that drive. And there we are, the media creation tool is now downloading Windows 11, which it will then verify and use to create our Windows 11 media on the USB drive. And do note, this will delete everything that was on the USB drive. And there we are, it's finished. So let's use the magic of filmmaking to return to the new PC, which is currently turned off but with our USB drive inserted. So if we turn on the power, it should now boot from the USB drive into the Windows installer. And there we are, it's done just that. The language is selected OK, so let's click on Next. And the keyboard setting is right, so we'll click Next again. And as we can see, the default option is to install Windows 11, and we'll click this box to say we agree everything will be deleted, although there's nothing currently to delete. So let's once again click on Next, and at this screen we can enter a product key if we have one. I don't currently have a product key, so I'm going to click on I don't have a product key. Next, we need to select the version of Windows 11 we wish to install. Here I'm going to go for the home version. And on this screen, we need to accept the license agreement. Following on, we now need to select the drive to install on, which is the SSD on our computer. So again, we'll click Next. And then finally, we click on Install. And here we are installing Windows 11. So let's speed on through. And here is where the fun begins. Is my region right? I will go yes. Right keyboard method, yes again. Do I want a second layout? Skip. And according to Windows, I've lost my internet connection. I don't think I have. My Ethernet lead is still connected. Let's click on retry. And for me here, things now seem to be working. But at this point, you may need to install Wi-Fi drivers if you're not using an Ethernet connection. But for me, I'll just click on Next. And it would now like me to give this device a name. So I'll do that. And then once again, click on Next. And oh look, even though we downloaded a brand new installation media, it's picking up some updates. Next, Windows wants us to sign in with a Microsoft account to apparently unlock the experience, and whilst I often don't do this on this channel, here I'm going to demonstrate the most basic install, so I will sign in with a Microsoft account. Next, we get no choice whatsoever to create a pin. Not very happy about that, but there we are. And now we get to the point where we're invited to donate our digital soul to the devil. And I'm not going to do that, so I'm going to enter no here and on everything else that now comes up. And because I logged in with a Microsoft account also used on another computer, it's inviting me to use the same settings on this system. And oh look, just to make things even more annoying, it's offering a level of customization that I really don't want, so I will skip this. I certainly don't want to back up anything to Microsoft, thank you very much. I absolutely do not want to use my phone from my PC. I certainly don't want to continue browsing from where I was. And I absolutely do not want a free trial of Microsoft 365 family. Similarly, I don't want to buy more cloud storage from Microsoft. And yes, I knew this, I am a Microsoft 365 customer, I'm just going to click on Next. So, now Microsoft wants to try and sell us something else, so I'll skip for now. And there we are, we've installed Windows 11 on our new PC. This said, we've done so using a Microsoft account, which is very much what Microsoft wants us to do, but for reasons Microsoft has just very much demonstrated, this is not something everybody does want to do. And so before we continue, I'm just going to roll back and show you how to install Windows 11 without a Microsoft account, but if you're happy to use one, just skip the next video chapter. It's still possible to install both the Home and Pro editions of Windows 11 without a Microsoft account. However, it's becoming more difficult and the methods required keep changing. Hence, whilst what I'm about to show you works in May 2025, it may not work in the future. This point noted, back here on the Microsoft download page, we're first going to download a Windows 11 ISO file. So, we'll select our download, that's the only option, and download now. And then we will pick a language. And finally, download the ISO file itself. Next, we're going to go to the website for an imaging utility called Rufus, where we're going to scroll down so we can download the latest standard version for a 64-bit Windows system. So we'll just save that file. And it doesn't need installing, so we can just run it like that. Tell Windows it's okay, it is. Check for updates, no we won't. And we now need to select a USB drive that's already plugged in, has been picked up like that. And we need to pick up our Windows ISO file over here like this. There it is. And if we now click on Start, we can see there is a box removing the requirement for an online Microsoft account. And we'll also create a local account with the username EC. And as we're here, we might as well also disable data collection so we can skip through the parts of a Windows installer related to that. And Rufus now checks we're happy to delete everything on our USB drive. We are, so I'll click OK. And there we are, it's finished. So as previously, let's return to the new PC and boot from the USB drive to run the Windows 11 installer. This will run just as it did in the last part of the video, and so here I'll speed on through everything that isn't the same as we've just seen, and only pause for anything that's different. And indeed, we're now rapidly progressing towards completion. Things look slightly different to what we saw in the last install, but there's been no input from the user required. And here we are, it's finished. Windows is installed. Although there's one thing we have to do to sort out our local account, and that is to restart. Here we go, because as you may recall, we didn't enter a password for the local account. But do not fear, as you can see, Windows has recognized this. It's asking us to change our password, where we're going to leave the previous password clear because there wasn't one there, but we do need to enter the new local password for this system. And there we go. We're back again with Windows 11 installed on our new PC. And it's entirely up to you whether you want to use Windows 11 with a Microsoft account or not, and hence whether you follow the first or second installation methods I've just shown. Greetings! Here I am back again, and I've made a few scaling changes so we can see things more easily on video, but other than that, nothing has changed and the PC is working fine. However, it's currently using basic Windows drivers, and so if we go down to search and type manage and go to computer management and to device manager, we can see that some devices are flagged with driver warnings. And so what we're now going to do is to install drivers from the motherboard manufacturer, which should offer better performance and stability. As you may recall, we disabled the motherboard feature that would have downloaded a driver utility. And so we now need to go to the web page for our PC's motherboard, here a Gigabyte B760M DS3H DDR4, and you should find it easy to find your motherboard web page via a web search. On such a page, in what's normally called the support section, we can find the motherboard drivers, and here if I restrict things to Windows 11, we see that 12 are available, including the audio driver that's listed here first, and also a number of chipset drivers. And each of these links to a file that can be downloaded and run to install the specific driver. However, if we go down a bit further to Utilities and scroll back up again, we can see there's also a link to the Gigabyte Control Center, which is the software that would have been automatically installed and run had we not disabled this in the BIOS. All motherboard manufacturers offer similar software, and it can be used to install drivers and to control things like RGB lighting and fans. However, such software is sometimes considered bloatware and does not always have a good reputation. Just to show you what it looks like, before I did our second Windows 11 install, I downloaded the Gigabyte Control Center, all 845 megabytes of it, and ran it up. As we can see, it offers fan and RGB lighting control and has an update section that can be used to install motherboard drivers. However, the first thing it would install by default is Norton Internet Security. So if you choose to run Gigabyte Control Center or similar software from another motherboard manufacturer, be very careful to uncheck anything you don't want to be installed and which would just clog up your nice new clean system. As you can probably guess, here I'm not going to install the Gigabyte Control Center utility. So instead, I'm going to download and install just the drivers I want individually. So let's start with the audio driver sitting here like that, which we will download and then run. There we go, that's all sorted, and note that after some driver installs, a reboot may be required. Next, I'm going to move on to the chipset drivers. Let's open those up like that, and we'll now speed through as I download and run each of them in turn. Although, oh look, straight away we find that the Intel dynamic tuning technology on this system isn't enabled in the BIOS, so we can't currently install the driver. Never mind, let's move on to the next one. Hopefully we'll be more successful with that. It seems we won't. The Gaussian and neural accelerator is also not turned on by default. So let's move on to number 3. There we are, that seems to be okay, so we'll continue on through. And there we are, our chipset drivers are now installed, and as a notification tells us, this is probably a good time to do a restart. Next, let's go back to that page. Here we are, and we'll go down to the LAN drivers section, down here, and oh, I forgot to filter for just Windows 11, let's do that. There we are. And here there are 2 drivers listed, the Realtek LAN driver and the Realtek LAN pre-install driver, and we only need the first one, as the pre-install driver only exists for situations where a driver needs installing during the Windows installation. This can sometimes be needed with, as you may recall, the Windows installer offering an opportunity to load such a driver for the wired LAN or Wi-Fi if needed. But once Windows is running, we don't need this, so we'll just install the main LAN driver. Moving on, we now get to storage drivers, where again there's a pre-installed driver for installing Windows in a RAID configuration. So I'm now going to install the Intel Rapid Storage driver. There we go, and then finally here under VGA we have an Intel graphic driver. But on this PC we have a separate graphics card plugged into our motherboard, and indeed our i3-14100F CPU does not have a GPU. And so we can be absolutely certain we don't need to install this driver. And this means that we're finished, so let's close down the web browser and do a reboot. And here we are back again, and if we cross our fingers and return to the device manager via computer management, yes, we can see that no hardware now has a flag to signal a driver issue. Next, we'll return to the motherboard support page once again, because I want to point out that here under support, in addition to drivers and utilities, we also have a BIOS section, which includes downloads to update the motherboard's BIOS, with the latest version being listed here at the top. Some people will tell you that you should always update the BIOS on a new motherboard. However, I personally advise caution, as a BIOS update is potentially risky. And so, unless you know that you need a BIOS update to support a particular piece of hardware or to fix a known issue, I would caution to let sleeping dogs lie. Finally, as you may remember, we have two things to activate in the BIOS, so let's go and do those. And after pressing the delete key, here we are back in the BIOS. Hello! Where if we go to Advanced CPU Settings, we can go down to Intel Dynamic Tuning Technology, which I know has been a bit controversial. Maybe that's why it's disabled by default, but I'm going to turn it on like that. And similarly, I'm going to go to Settings and to I/O ports, and go down and turn on the Gaussian and Neural Accelerator, which is a small AI coprocessor that may help with things like speech recognition. And so we'll now go across to Save and Exit, where we can hopefully now install our last two chipset drivers. Here we go, let's try. There we are, and the second one, hopefully the GNA. And there we are, we now have a complete set of installed motherboard drivers. Greetings, here I am back again, and Windows has now updated itself and for some reason in the process changed its desktop wallpaper. But what we've now got to do is to install a final driver for our GPU. If we were using integrated graphics, this would have been covered in the last part of the video. But because we have a discrete graphics card, we still need to sort the driver out. Just to note, if we open up the device manager, we can see that Windows has installed a driver, but if we take a look at it, it is rather old. We can do much better than this. So what we need to do is to download the driver from the chipset manufacturer website, and if you've got an NVIDIA graphics card, that means coming here, where you can download either the NVIDIA app or just the drivers you require, which are available for either gamers or creatives. And to keep things bloat-free, I personally recommend avoiding the app and just installing one of these drivers. Meanwhile, drivers for AMD graphics cards can be found here. And if we go down and press select, having selected a particular card like that, we again find here under Windows 11 that we can install either just a driver or AMD Software Adrenaline Edition, and here again personally I would install just the driver. However, on this PC we have an Intel graphics card, and so we need to go to this page where there are sections for just drivers, and again for software I have no desire to inflict on my PC. So let's go back to the drivers up here and click to download, which gets us to this page where we can actually download the driver file. And there we are, so let's open up the file and allow it to execute. There we go. And hey presto, we're in the Intel graphics driver installer. So we'll begin installation. Very exciting. And we have to accept the license agreement. And it would also be wise, it suggests, to close down other programs. So we will do that and continue. But I don't think I want to join the Intel Computing Improvement Program, so I'll decline that. And there we are. The installer is about to install the graphics driver and other software, even though we only downloaded the graphics driver. So I think I'm going to click on Customize down there and get rid of the graphics software, the support assistant, etc. I don't think we need any of that. We'll just install the graphics driver. And whilst this is occurring, you may be wondering, what would the graphics software look like? Well, I did try it out on a different install earlier. It looks like this. It gives us some control of the graphics card. You may find that useful, but it's not something I can see myself using, so I don't want this extra bloatware on the system. Anyway, back with the installation. It's almost complete. There we are, and we need to reboot. That's hardly a surprise. And here we are back again, where I'm going to go straight to Computer Management, into Device Manager. Let's see what's going on. And if we look under Display Adapters, we can see that, yes, we're now far more up to date. We have succeeded in installing the last driver on this system. And if we're lucky and we go down to the taskbar and we look in the tray, yes, nothing's been added to the tray. We've managed to do all of our driver installs bloatware free. Greetings! It's now the next day and Windows has started to display a watermark down here to tell us that it's not activated. Windows 11 can be used without a license for evaluation as long as you like. But options for personalization will be limited. Although contrary to what it informs us here in settings, it is possible to change the desktop background before activation, which we can do just by opening a folder with an image in it and right-clicking and then selecting the Set as Desktop Background option. But of course Windows is still not activated, so let's sort that out. If you installed Windows 11 using a Microsoft account and you already have a retail Windows license that can be used on your new PC, then Windows should activate automatically. However, if you require a new license, there are several options. One is to purchase a license from Microsoft, for example via this page where we can click here, and if we scroll down, oh look, we can purchase either a USB or download copy of Windows 11. And if you purchase a download copy whilst logged in to a Microsoft account on your PC, Windows should again activate automatically. However, if you're using Windows 11 with a local account as we are here, then when you purchase a license, you'll need to enter a product key that you'll be sent via email or other means. Now, whilst you can purchase from Microsoft, many other companies sell Windows product keys at far lower prices. Often, these have been purchased in bulk and were intended for use by an OEM or original equipment manufacturer. But most low-cost keys are perfectly legal, and for this computer I have purchased such a low-cost key. And I'm not going to say where I purchased it from, as I'll immediately be accused of this video being sponsored, which it isn't. So let's go to Settings, like that, and we'll also maximize our display. And as we can see, Windows is very keen to be activated, so let's click on Activate Now. And as I've got a product key, I'll click on Change Against Product Key, and I'll now enter my product key. There we are, and click on Next. There we go, and I can now click on Activate. Very exciting, and oh look, Windows has been activated. We've activated this copy of Windows. And hopefully that means, yes, the watermark has disappeared into the land of Narnia, and our new PC setup is now complete. So there we are. We've set up a new PC and it's all working very nicely. For more information on configuring Windows 11, including its privacy settings, you may want to look at my video on Windows 11 configuration. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And I hope to talk to you again very soon.